Alright, here's a recreation of a conversation I had with my friend last week. I've been watching that new show you've seen. Let me guess, Gachiakuta? I haven't actually seen it. What? But you've been posting about it. Yeah, but that's because of the kick-ass character design and music. The world seems super interesting, and I'm willing to bet that it's a good show. So watch it. Okay. I'm sure many of you were brought to Gachiakuta, a show whose name I hope I'm pronouncing correctly the same way I was. Either because of the music being amazing and fun to listen to outside of the show, or seeing people's original ideas for their own vital instrument weapon online, or maybe even just because it kept showing up on Crunchyroll anytime you open the app. I know that was the case for me before I actually started seeing it spread throughout the internet. However you found the show, there definitely had to be some sort of allure that drew so many people in to make it blow up. So, despite my usual cautious optimism, I was really excited to give this one a try, and needless to say, it was so worth the watch. Immediately upon starting the episode, you're met with a message that basically says anyone's soul can connect with a vital instrument as long as they give it enough love and care. And honestly, I was reminded of Soul Eater, which I want to preface that in my mind, this was a good thing, and not an immediate accusation of the show being a ripoff. From both personal experience and general media engagement, I've started to realize lately that a lot of creative genius can actually stem from something that isn't entirely original, but can still be made into something new and reimagined, fitting for the show in and of itself. The Lion King, both the first and second movie, for example, are both inspired by Shakespearean media, being Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet, and it's hard to argue the success of the first movie, and while Disney sequels themselves weren't the greatest successors, the second Lion King movie is still considered to be one of the stronger ones, so both still have a relatively high standing in terms of profound Disney media today, even if they had existing source material to go off of. There's also just the plethora of film media inspired by books such as Harry Potter, Songbirds and Snakes, or heck, even Mean Girls, which I feel like most people didn't know was based off a book. Or even if we wanted to stick to the same genre of anime, there's plenty of isekais with similar concepts to each other that still show themselves to be successful. All of this to say, Soul Eater, good show. This one might be too. But I also want to tap in and say that while we're here at this opening and mentioning of vital instruments, that I didn't know enough about Gachiakuta to really spoil any vital information or information that wasn't at least blatantly obvious. But I still had enough light exposure to be familiar with the concept, as I mentioned before. So while I didn't entirely know how these instruments operate, my existing understanding was that the bare concept seemed to be that people who use everyday, ordinary materials, if said materials are treated with care, can make them into weapons interwoven into the creator's soul in some way or another. Weapons with souls connected to the people handling them. Sounds like Soul Eater to me. But again, I meant that with praise, given that I adore Soul Eater, but I trusted Gachiakuta in that it was strong enough to take this existing concept and make it its own for the sake of this story. After all, I doubt this show would have gained so much traction if people were just pointing out that it was another copy-paste product. So, from there, we get some small but poignant world building, fantastic art style that won't bore me to tears aside. I've watched a lot of anime lately where the art style was icky. You can already tell from the environmental scenery and the way these first few characters are dressed, as well as the accompanying dialogue from the mother, that these characters are wealthy, upper class, elitist types, which is why I say, fuck you, Mom! You're teaching your kid to be a rich spoiled brat if you think that rabbit really needed to be thrown out already, especially if you just bought it! Classism, ever present, just from the opening, it already comes back to rear its ugly head again moments later when Rudo starts raiding through the trash heap and attempts to evade the guards that spot him. Ordinarily, raiding the leftovers of someone's unwanted possessions wouldn't matter to really anyone. Chances are that they only took issue with it because the supposed lower life forms, who they don't see as their equal, have a desire for the items they wasted, meaning those people are either equally filthy or so beneath them that they're not even worthy of their gross remains. Of course, if it's to be believed that vital instruments are also sourced from old trash, then there's a chance that the elite sees it as dangerous to their people if the lower class can obtain and or create weapons of defense, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We haven't even mentioned the huge wall separating the two classes of people, which I felt the need to compare to the wall in Attack on Titan, separating the people from the oversized monsters at the beginning of the show. I never finished that show, so I honestly wonder if the wall still stands. But that aside, we get more personal moments with Rudo and his side of the world, and I just adore the character design and art style of this series. I said it before, but Rudo and Chiwa's design push it to the forefront here. Unique quirks like oversized gloves and unkempt hair are such fun touches for me, as well as characters with red eyes. I have a soft spot for those. His His design and admittedly rash behavior when he went on the trash raid gave me the indication that Rudo's a bit more brash, although from his behavior, calm and collected enough to not have ill intent. So my initial observation of him was that he seemed pretty standoffish, and his name was literally Rude, as if to prove that point. But then I immediately changed my mind and sympathized with him because I felt bad about how those boys harassed him, as if they weren't both in the slums and they were no better off than Rudo was. But then he showed how sweet he was with Chiwa, and it was the cutest friggin' thing ever. Be it the character design or that I just liked his name, I was pretty immediately attached to Rudo. I also really like his voice. His voice actor voices one of my favorite characters in media of all time, Ruggy from Twisted Wonderlands. I knew it clicked for me immediately. I knew it sounded familiar, but then I was like, oh, he's that character I like, so that gave him bonus points. But again, I just mean to say that I was pretty immediately attached to Rudo, although it really could have just been because of these first moments we had with him as viewers. Sure, the bullying was meant to inspire sympathy for our lead, who has clearly had a difficult childhood, but his little moments with Chiwa and later with his father figure read as so sweet and so innocent. With the voice cast also being extremely noteworthy here, again, I watched the sub by the way, it's made very emphatically clear that Rudo is just a kid. Honestly, I would believe he's a 12-year-old, but I'm sure he's probably supposed to be 15 in universe. But if Rudo can still experience normal teenage boy things like getting flustered about trying to give a gift to a girl he likes, then even if he feels his difficult upbringing has made him jaded, given his, again, standoffish behavior, there's still a lot of that childlike innocence left within his character. So basically, what I'm saying is, protect Rudo at all costs. Same goes for Regto, whose name just sounds like it was inspired by pasta. I love these small moments of affection he shares with Rudo, just teasing him about a simple life thing such as liking a girl. I was practically screaming that Rudo just give Chiwa the bunny already. Everything about these moments were just so sweet. Of course, there's also the mention of Rudo's gloves here and his wounded hands. And honestly, I thought nothing of Rudo's gloves initially, because in my mind, big chunky gloves equals cool-ass character design. But I'm already kind of wondering, could they be Rudo's vital instrument? I considered that it was presumptuous to think that he had one already, when really there's not been much to show that anyone outside of the pit even has a use for a vital instrument, much less knows what one is. But that said, when Rudo began to explain that the pain in his hands didn't go away until he obtained the gloves, that made me think the pain didn't actually stem from something physical, but from something emotional. And I'll reiterate that it seems like he's still just a kid, so he may be more emotionally susceptible to the viewing judgment his hands received, meaning there's a chance the pain only stemmed from how uncomfortable he was about the negative attention his hands attracted. But what's more is that despite the pain stopping when he received the gloves themselves don't seem to be particularly special. Rudo practically said as much in the episode, although I don't think they're all that worn out, but okay. I think in reality what gave them the ability to make Rudo feel better was that despite being ordinary gloves, the compassion and love Regto had for Rudo found a way to integrate into the gloves, as if Regto's soul itself was already integrated into them to keep Rudo safe. There's also just the fact that, like I said, the gloves themselves are pretty big and chunky compared to your average gloves, and I've seen that vital instruments can grow in size, but I can also see if that's pushing it, because it's not as if they're Vi's gauntlets from Arcane or anything, but for now, I digress. It was when we got the explanation of the pit that I suddenly remembered. Oh god. Hey! I read the manga synopsis before. I know where Rudo's going. As if Rudo going to the pit wasn't blatantly obvious to anyone else who would have been watching the episode, but contrary to this video, I have a tendency to actually turn off my brain quite a bit whenever I'm watching a show. But even so, you could already tell there was something more to the pit below, and that the people who are exiled there are not, in fact, executed, just lost to another world. The pit just looked too vast to really have nothing within, and there was no proper confirmation that being banished to the pit was an execution, since the supposed guilty were still alive upon sentencing and didn't have a follow-up to confirm loss of vitality. There's a good chance that an entirely new community of people exists down there. I'm sure it's like even its own culture. Also, I think it was only because Chiwa asked Rudo not to go to the pit that I even remembered reading the first manga synopsis, which explicitly stated that Rudo would be framed and found guilty on trial, specifically for murder. So, best believe that anytime Rudo fled the scene to a new location, I was very afraid that we'd either find Rudo walking in on a murder scene, or someone else seeing Rudo in the aftermath of the murder with no way to properly explain himself. Lo and behold, after Ruto has the cutest moment in the world with Chiwa, who indirectly tells him she loves him, I was then stabbed 37 times in the chest, when an unexplained masked figure had killed Rigatoni right in front of Ruto. I thought back to the masked figure from the first Sony Spider-Man movie, simply because in that moment we have no way of knowing who the masked figure is, and they seem to have a special music cue. But what I did know is that I'd be hating them for as long as they remained unidentified, because they hurt the main character that I've already come to love, and who, honestly, is just an innocent kid. To think these elitist adults would immediately assume the worst of a child, simply because he's of the lower class and his father had committed a heinous crime, of which Ruto hasn't proved himself capable. If Ruto wasn't even raised by his biological father, then it's hard to mimic the actions of a man who wasn't even involved in your life, and it's not as if you can claim bloodlust to be some sort of biological trait. That's just ridiculous. The injustice in the scene was inevitable, but it didn't change the fact that I wanted to cry when I saw my new son getting so mistreated. I was so distraught during his sentencing. The trial seemed so immediate that Ruto hadn't even been given the time to catch his breath. My heart was on the floor. I'm pretty sure the upper class were also present for the previous sentencing when Chiwa and Ruto served as observers earlier in the episode, but reviewing the crowd, I found myself wondering this time why the upper class was even there to begin with. Was it to further humiliate the lower class and or remind the lower class of the power they held over them? Or was it that the people watching were all elite officials, such as royals and guards? Either way, I wouldn't be surprised if the primary goal was just to promote more infighting amongst the lower class with their presence alone. Oh, but that didn't make them as bad as Chiwa. Fuck Chiwa? Fuck Chiwa. How can you change your mind on a whim like that when you knew him personally? Like, you'd think you wouldn't turn your back so quickly on someone you knew personally and knew wouldn't do this, but sure, okay, he's just a murderer like his father, I guess, whatever. Fuck you. But, on the bright side, we had the coolest freaking mic drop moment ever after that. The POV shot when we fell alongside Ruto and the music kicked in so perfectly. I can't remember the last time I watched something that really hammered home the message so well that we weren't about to be in Kansas anymore. Not to mention, the music itself just had no right being so insanely good, but it did a fantastic job setting the tone. I feel like we don't try enough POV shots in anime. This reminded me of a scene from the Haikyuu dumpster battle movie where we watched the remaining moments of the volleyball match directly from Kenma's perspective. It does such a good job in helping us understand the full intensity of the situation and the stakes that come with it, not just because of Kenma's heavy breathing and the need to think quickly on his feet, but also putting into perspective how high and how fast Hinata manages to move whenever he's in the middle of a match, reminding us of what a strong opponent he was and what made the entire match so difficult and weighted to begin with. It's genuinely one of my favorite scenes in all of anime, and Gachiakuta managed to have so much of the same effect when it showed us the walls of dirt above Ruto, and it really forced us to feel the weight of the fall with how sudden the view ahead of him shifted, not to mention, for the millionth time, the music that managed to kick in so perfectly, tonally initiating less of an idea of fear so much as a new unknown adventure about to begin. Absolute perfection. Finally, we're given a little preview of what it means for Ruto to be in the pit, and holy shit, is that a dinosaur? So, first episode. First impressions. Where do I stand? I don't know, I think it's pretty good. I am genuinely surprised by how much the first episode alone has managed to surpass my expectations. To be completely honest, I'm pretty hesitant to engage with shows that are super trendy or popular. I couldn't help but feel that a lot of the time when I finally engaged with it, I just didn't enjoy the series the way I expected to, or I was disappointed by how overhyped it may have been. On top of that, I've just had a recent track record where a lot of the new anime I was starting was just good enough, rather than quality, rather than something I could really dig my nails into. Earlier last year, I tried catching up with Demon Slayer because the movie was supposed to be coming out around my birthday, and everything I'd seen about the Infinity Castle and how it works seemed so promising and climactic. But sadly, by the time I finished the Swordsmith arc, I couldn't help but feel exhausted and underwhelmed. I still hadn't connected with any of the characters, even if I liked some of their designs, and despite the insanely gorgeous animation that Demon Slayer always shows itself to have, the actual story just didn't seem to match up with its visual strength. So mostly, I felt bored. Gachiakuta reignited an excitement in me that Demon Slayer didn't. The art style alone was one I favored, but the show wasn't relying on the art just to keep you engaged with it. The characters had small, personal moments between each other to properly establish their relationships and kind hearts within them. I adored Rudo from the second I saw him on screen, and what little I know about a world of trash of all things has already proven to be so intriguing and worth watching the next episode for. Adding on to that, there's simply the time efficiency of the show. Maybe it was in part because of the art style, but my eyes were glued to the screen the entire episode, and I never had a moment where I even considered looking away or checking the time. Not even the credits, which were accompanied by a fantastic hard hitter of a song, and given the music I've already heard swimming the web, I know it's just going to keep getting better. So, Gachiakuta. Worth my time. Will I be watching? Will I make cosplays and discuss ideas for vital instruments and theorize with random people on the internet because I might not be able to shut up about this show? Yeah.